recording. Do you pick up my audio? You do. Great, the microphone works. All right, so today we're going to be talking about the industry. First couple of things. D2L is updated now. All of the dates should be right. If anything is still wrong, just let me know. But everything should be properly dated. All of the assignments should be due at the right times. I've also removed the date restrictions on the content pages so you can skip ahead a couple weeks and actually see what's going on in those weeks. Good. That being said, there's also 2 new news articles. First is this link, if I can go back to Course Home. A guide to game industry jobs. This was posted to LinkedIn very recently. It is quite literally just a guide to games design industry jobs. So we've got a nice, wonderful Word document compiled of what it means to go apply for one of these jobs, what types of jobs there are. It goes into a breakdown of each and every one, and then towards the end, there's a happy little table of job roles. So you have jobs in art and animation, jobs in actual game design, whether you want to be an animator, a game designer, a level designer, because there's a lot of different independent parts to making a game. Whether you want to be on the background, the programming and development side of things, sound, oh, it's cut off at the top there, no. And then lastly, like quality assurance type stuff, right? All of this is very important to game design. And I just wanted to throw that out there so that you have one more reference to go to for when you're looking for those jobs that I talked about on Monday, so that you can look up those jobs that you might want to write about in your discussion posts. The other news bulletin that will be popping up later today after today's class is this image of Maya shortcuts. This is a bit much because every key is a shortcut if you try hard enough. And I will be going into these, the important ones, in a bit more detail later today and on Wednesday, right? We don't have class Monday, remember it's Labor Day. And we'll be going into this sort of stuff. Whoop. That's that. So, when talking about game design in the industry, I've talked a bit about how we're going to be using Maya and Unreal, and I know that some of you might be wondering why. So I want to briefly talk about how game design affects the industry outside of game design. And I want to start that off by asking, are there any old school Disney fans? Great. I love seeing the raise of hands. Has anyone here seen Atlantis? Great. Does anyone know that Atlantis was a mixed 2 and 3D experience? Great. And this video I'm about to show you will make sense to you. For the rest of you, it'll be a wonder. So, in the Disney film Atlantis, I'm just going to start this video here where it says digital production.
There's more digital production in Atlantis: The Lost Empire than in any movie we've ever really done.
I think a lot of it just depends on what the demands of the story are. For instance, the submarine or the creature the submarine encounters, they're huge, they're very detailed, they're very geometrical in their design. It would be really time-consuming and difficult to do all that kind of stuff by hand. Whereas if you build a digital model,
or you'd have to cut a lot of corners.
Yes.
So with digital models of both,
which is what we're going to be doing on a very basic level, it looks something like this. This is a model. Yes. Is this the attendance sheet? Assuming that more people are going to filter in, because I think we still have a couple empty desks, and leave this in the back. While you watch the turnaround of the giant lobster thing. So something like this is an application of our game design modeling expertise for the film industry. This is a daunting task, and I don't expect any of you to produce something to this level, because this is an introduction course. But know that this is something that happens. If you want to see the stuff that I'm working on, which is very similar to this, whoop, I say it's similar because it's the exact same thing. So this is the same exact creature, except that I personally modeled it and rendered it in Unreal. This is sort of a recreation of what that would look like if the film were made using modern day technology instead of what they were using back in 2010. Very pretty. Thank you very much. Great. Outside of film and game design, does anybody have any ideas where you might use a game? Blank across the screen. Yes, in the back.
What about like virtual like housing tours instead of
Virtual housing tours, very good option. Yes, you can recreate. I'm not going to say virtual housing tours because I don't know about that specifically, but for people that are interested, does anybody remember that the Notre Dame burnt down?
Yeah.
The Notre Dame was rebuilt based on a model from Assassin's Creed.
Wow.
Yes.
No.
Nope, that is a thing that happened. The models and all of the references used for building the Notre Dame in Assassin's Creed were the highest definition versions of the floor plans, the blueprints, that they had on hand, because all of the original blueprints are ancient. So instead, they rebuilt the Notre Dame based off of the Assassin's Creed 3D models. Thank you very much. What else? Any other ideas? Because none of them are wrong. Yes.
For like medical science to see how human bodies work.
Medical science. Yeah, let's talk about medical science. Has anyone heard of the Trach and Vet project that is happening here? Great. So as part of a partnership with the East Tennessee Children's Hospital, we've had a couple of students, a couple of semesters working on, stop that, this project, which is about training nurses how to change a breathing tube for a tracheotomy. Please. Nope. I'll leave that loading while I talk about it. So, as a partnership with the East Tennessee Children's Hospital, some of the graduate students and a lot of the undergrads, there's a class called Production that happens usually every 2 semesters, where the department gets a project from a client and we work to develop it. So the East Tennessee Children's Hospital was like, hey, we've got a bunch of nurses we need to train. How can we do that? And our idea was, okay, what if instead of letting the nurses train on live children, which is a good thing, but let's hold off on that, and instead of doing it on dolls, because dolls cost money, let's do it in VR headsets. So we developed a program that is not being displayed because the internet is bad. Let's see if I can just find it a different way. Please. This sort of stuff always happens. By the way, how many people still can't access Maya? Great. Glad that everyone has access to Maya then. I will be expecting all of your posts on Friday when the thing is due. Let's try here. Maybe it's because it's, there we go. Here we go. This is VR simulation, where we teach people how to grab water bottles, read clipboards, and change trach tubes on a fake child. Saving lives one step at a time. We've been working on this project for about 2 years at this point, along with other various projects for the hospital. Fun, medical science. Outside of this scale of medical science, we've also, has anyone heard of Foldit? Foldit was a project, I believe, back in 2009. It is a protein, come on Alex, spelled. It is a protein folding game. Here we go. The idea behind Foldit is that you get crowdsourced data from thousands of people that like to play video games and solve puzzles. And what that lets you do is you say, hey, here's the protein we want to figure out. And we find it so low quality. Probably this video from 2009. Great. How do we that happens in an engine. Every company does it in a different engine. We here use Unreal. A lot of people use Unity. Does anybody know any other engines by any chance? Probably not, but he is.
I'm pretty sure, isn't Frostbite engine?
Frostbite is an engine. Other engines we've used in the past, Construct is mostly for Flash games. Flash died. We used to teach Construct here. No longer happens. RPG Maker, Game Studio, all of those simple. You probably heard of them in like high school computing classes or even earlier like in computer games. All of those engines are things that exist. I'm going to try and play a video game. Assuming that this works. Maybe. Well, assuming that that game loads, I'll run you through what goes into a game design process. But practically speaking, oh, woohoo! Maybe? Well, one of my screens went black, that's great. Assuming that loads. Game design process in Unreal usually happens in 3 stages. There's the pre-production stage, the planning, when God's name goes into the game. Then there's the actual production of the thing. That is subdivided into, let's make all of the assets for it. Love to see it. Oh, there we go. Let's make all of the assets for a game. Then it goes into, let's make the coding for the game. So everything you're seeing on screen right now is what is known as an asset or a thing, right? This tree is an asset, this dragon is an asset, the grass, the ground, the rocks, everything's an asset. All of that gets put into the game. The controls that actually allow you to do things within that game, that's all code. That is also a part of game design. We'll be touching on that in the second half of the semester. When things move, that is animation. So this walk cycle, this run cycle that the dragon's doing, this jump animation, all of that is animation. You'll be learning that in animation. But you will be touching upon some of it here, maybe. And then you have UI design. So if I run over here, if you see the menu up in the top right giving you instructions, that's a form of UI. If I interact with this lady over here,
hey, oh
that's
hey,
an
a
animation
dragon!
cutscene.
I've lost
And
my
then
spell
there's
book
also
around town,
this
and I
form
need
of
help
UI where
finding it.
she
Can you help me?
talks on screen.
Once you found it,
All of
can you
that is
please
in
come back to
cinematics,
me?
which we'll be
Thank
talking
you
about
so
in the
much.
second half of the semester. This will fade out. Interaction between blueprints, in between assets. So if I run it into this book and I hit the interact key, the dragon will grab the book in its mouth. That's a whole line of code, that's a whole block of process. And then going back to the girl and being like, this is all very basic stuff, right?
Oh
This
my
is the
gosh,
basic
you
game,
found my spell
but
book.
You can see how much
You're a
might go
lifesaver.
into
Thank you
something
so much for
of
your
this
help.
size.
I hope we cross paths again.
That being said, that is the second half of the semester. We will be doing this type of stuff. Loading screen. In the first half of the semester, we're going to be producing assets. That is your dice, your chair, your crate. Those 3 things will be made by you. Then we'll be polishing them up, and then you might put them back into Unreal. And we'll also be going into importing assets into Unreal, I think, towards the end of the semester. But to show you a couple of assets in Maya, things we won't be making, but you can make. If you remember back to that hospital project I showed you a bit ago, this is the bed the child is lying on. This is an asset. If we zoom in on it, you can see that it's made of shapes. Anyone that has passed geometry knows that those are triangles. This is a triangulated piece of geometry. Unreal triangulates anything you put in it because triangles are very simple, very easy to compute. That being said, we will not be working with triangles, we will be working with squares. So I'm going to pull in this dog. This is a dog made out of squares. They don't look like squares. That's because we call them quads, because really they're just 4-sided polygons. Both are perfectly fine. Tris and quads are very good. Anything with more than 4 sides is a n-gon, not a pentagon. We don't like n-gons here. N-gons are bad. Why are n-gons bad? I'm about to show you. So if I'm an animator and I look at this dog, and I want to move a leg. If I go to face selection, and I will explain how I'm doing what I'm doing in just a bit, and I want to grab the leg, if I have quads, I can select pieces of this dog that perfectly match the leg. Ooh, or the whole thing. Give me just the leg. And then you also have segments that are like, aha, from here upwards, it is the neck. From here around, it is the waist. That sort of thing. And if you do things in quads, you will have very nice loops. If you don't have quads, if I delete this one, whack. Ooh, didn't like that. Let's try that again. There we go. Now we have this weird shape. This is a single flat plane with about 10 different sides. If I try and do a loop selection, now it gets a little weird. Doesn't quite know where the loop's supposed to go. That one is supposed to connect back here, but instead it went up there. It's a lot of, everything gets sort of mixed and mashed together. Great. Loops. Yes, question.
Is it either squares or triangles, like, is one of them preferred?
Yeah, so for our purposes, quads are ideal. Everything with a 4-sided polygon is ideal, and the reason for that is because of these loops. If you make triangles, Unreal will do that for you anyway, so there's no reason to go that far. But if you go into triangles, you also end up with weird loop scenarios. So if I create a triangle here, please work, thank you. This computer's a bit slow today. Is it willing to behave? Oh, okay. I made this model pretty damn good. All right, never mind. I can't show you why triangles are bad. But rest assured, they are. If I go back to the bed, actually, here's a better example. I'm gonna try and do the same thing I was doing with the dog on this bed. I have failed. I cannot actually select the loop. I can either select the whole thing, because it doesn't know which faces are leading into each other. Instead it just knows, all of this is made of triangles. Can anybody actually tell that a portion of this model is orange instead of blue and gray?
Yeah.
That's good. 'Cause I have difficulty with that, and usually I change my colors around to make it more obvious, but for the purposes of, I don't want to necessarily teach you how to customize things, I'll leave it on default. I will be teaching you how to customize things in just a second, but we'll get there soon. Have I lost anybody yet?
I've been lost since I got here, but
Great, good answer. Is there anything you'd like me to go into a shred more detail on?
there's a lot.
Great. Yeah, no, this class runs fast. Don't hesitate to reach out to me if you need any help with anything. I'm about to go into this in a lot more depth. So this is an asset. This is a hospital bed. I'm actually going to close the dog because I think the dog is breaking. I'll leave the dog up over here for just a second. This is an asset. This asset, very broadly, can anybody tell me what basic shapes are a part of this hospital bed?
Squares and circles.
Squares and circles. That would be true, except we're dealing with 3 dimensions.
So cubes and spheres.
Spheres are close. We're dealing with cylinders. Good answer, good answer. I'm watching all of you. So let's remake this bed in about 2 seconds. Let's start with not a sphere because we discussed that spheres are bad. Cylinder. This is a cylinder. I'm gonna make it big. This is a cylinder. Ooh, cylinder. What we call these very basic shapes is polygon primitives, right? Because everything is made out of a polygon, and it is primitive. Great. Every polygon primitive, spheres, cubes, what have you, is made up of quads and triangles. Cubes, very easily made out of quads. Cylinders, that circle bit up top gets a little weird. So the way that the cylinders work in Maya is that we've got this one central vertex up the top in the circular plane. That's the center of the circle. And a bunch of spokes. It's basically a wheel. Great. Cylinder. On every single asset and model that we will be making, we will refer to the little dots as vertexes. So if anybody has passed basic math, you will know that a cube has how many vertexes?
4.
8.
8.
Square. There's 8. How many sides does a cube have?
6.
Good. How many edges does a cube have?
8.
12.
I heard 12. 12 is the correct answer because we have 4 up top, 4 at bottom, and 4 connecting them all around. Now, how might we want to actually know that? If you go, I'm actually going to describe all of these menus up top. Let's do that. Starting on the left, File. It's your normal file stuff. If you've ever used Word, it's File. Save stuff, open stuff, good stuff. When you open Maya, the very first thing you want to do, set project. This is how you're going to live in the next couple years of your life. When you open Maya and you set a project, it'll ask you where. This is how you decide where things will save automatically. If you ever want autosave, if you ever want to just hit Control-S to save your things, start by setting your project. When you set your project, right now I'm going to set it to projects in the default document Maya file folder. I'm going to rename this to class, please. Fine, we'll just set it here. New folder, there we go. Class underscore 1500 because that is what class we're in. Set. I have set my project. It's asking me whether I want to choose somewhere else or make a workspace. You will choose to make a workspace, assuming that you are making new projects for each of these. And then from then on, if I go to project window, it'll ask me, do I want all of these subfolders? The answer is yes. Just yes. And then, why don't you like me? Is it having a file directory issue? I hope not. My class, where did it go? Why are you like this? Please, thank you. Here's my class. It's empty. I know it's empty. Why am I getting an error? Blah, 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 blah. I don't have permission to edit this directory. Hilarious. All right, we'll do this again. Set project. This time, let's do it somewhere reasonable. Documents. Yes. Here. Make a new folder. Sure. Project window. Do the thing. Why are you like this? Okay, good. You did the thing. Now, when I save this file, it will automatically, if I enlarge this window, put the damn thing in the scenes folder of the new project directory that we just made. Wow, that's great. If I remove scenes from this URL, these are all of the folders we just made. You can see that Maya automatically splits up your autosaves into its own folder. That way you will never lose them, which is good. Keep that. All of your regular saves will be in scenes, because this is a scene that we have here. We won't be dealing with sound. We will be dealing with source images. Anything that you save out of Maya, those will be MP4s, frames, that sort of stuff will go into the images folder. There we go. Everything will be in this happy little window and you will never lose it again. Set your projects, set your projects, set your projects. Moving on, edit, copy paste. Everybody knows copy paste. Control copy, control paste. Control paste is a little finicky in Maya. Careful. Duplicate is a lot better. That is Control D as opposed to Control V. We'll get there when we get there. also down here. Delete by type history. We'll be getting to that with hopefully not the dice, but probably the crate will be dealing with delete type history. And then we have create. This is the same orange buttons that we have up here. This is where we create our polygon primitives. Create NURBs. NURBs are blue. We don't like NURBs. But if you'd like to see a NURB, you can go over here. You'll be using these in animation, if any of you are taking animation. That's a circle. You'll notice that the circle doesn't have a gray shape tied to it. It's just a blue circle. That's because NURBs don't have polygons. Any confusion on that? We won't be touching NURBs here, probably, unless. Anyways, moving on. Polymodeling. Create. Polygon primitives. These are the same exact buttons we have on this batch. Good. Select. Select all. Boom, I selected all. Easy. Select by type. Slightly harder. This is if you have multiple different types of stuff in your scene. We just have polygon primitives. Don't worry too much about select all. If you are an animator, you'll care about joints. For now, we won't be dealing with that. I've never used anything else in the select menu. You shouldn't have to either. Modify. This is where we will be playing with mesh. Modify, mesh, edit mesh, mesh tools, and mesh display. Those are the good ones that we care about. If I were to shrink all of these objects down, oh dear, that was big. Please become small. Thank you. You will see that Maya, by default, has a grid. The grid is helpful because it lets you know how big things are. Not so helpful when you're dealing with real-sized beds. If you need to do that, you need to change the size of your grid. I'll get to that, that's the next menu. Within the Modify menu, the only big tool that matters is the Align tool. If I click the Align tool, you'll see that my shape now has these funny little rectangles sticking out the edges of it. If I select another shape, then I get this gray rectangle around the gray box because everything is gray in Maya. And then if I click these blue rectangles, things will snap to the position of the other things. Isn't that fun? The Align tool. Correct. Undo. Thank you. Good. Done. That's everything you need to care about in Modify, except for freeze transformations. We'll get to freeze transformations in a second. Display. This is where I was heading towards. Display is where things get displayed. Step 1, the grid. This controls the grid. Now the grid is gone. If I turn the grid back on, the grid comes back on. Hooray. If I click this happy little box next to grid, it'll open up a window. And this window has some fine detailed controls. Maya by default is, I believe, in centimeters or meters. It's in metric is the important part. All of our stuff will be in metric. I don't particularly like imperial. Anybody here prefers feet and inches? No. Thank you for laughing. So currently we have a distance of 12 units. That's illogical. I'm going to crank that up to 100. Grid lines every 5. That means that we'll have a grid line every 20 units. Good. And every 20 units we'll have 5 subdivisions, which means they'll be broken up into 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Hooray. We can also change the color of the axes by dragging these. Why is it like this? Because it is. You can also click on the happy little box and it should pop up a color option. It does not. For the sake of this presentation, I'm going to make my axes darker, and you're going to watch on the grid as it gets darker. Boom! It's darker, and the grid is bigger. Huzzah! Now I can work with larger models. I am crazy, so if I ever open a Maya scene that looks like this, if I this is how I use Maya. Some people get nausea from this. I think that it lets me see things better. Set up Maya however you like it so that you can see what's going on. That's the grid. The other thing that's worth displaying is the heads-up display. If I hover over heads-up display, you'll get a bunch of options. The ones that matter, the only one that matters in my opinion, is the polygon count. Now we have this, and it's gonna live there forever. In fact, now that I'm actually here, I'm gonna turn off this silly little cube. No view cube. Thank you. So, what does this show me? Vertices. How many vertices are in the scene? There's a whole lot. How many edges are in the scene? Faces, tries, UVs, etc. If I select the cube, haha, the second bar now tells me the cubes have 8 vertices, 12 edges, etc. Does that make sense? Good. If I select the cylinder, we'll know how many vertices, edges, blah, blah, blah. And if we select the bed, oh dear. Now the reason for this is because the bed is a triangulated model, and also because if you cut out all of the diagonals, you're only cutting out about 1/3 of the faces anyways. So, bed's fairly high poly. If I go back to the dog, hopefully this doesn't crash Maya. I'm going to go back to the dog, turn up my heads-up display. But you see how many vertices are in this dog. This dog is actually a retopoed dog. Let me see if I can find the original. It might not like this. I wish to make you not hit it. Control Shift H. Nope. Why don't you let me? There it is. Okay. Don't. So this is a portion of the dog, as you can very clearly tell. That is because I cut out 90% of the dog, but you'll also notice that if I click on this dog, you can actually see the individual edges, whereas if I click on this dog, you can't see the polygons. But if you look at our heads-up display, you'll realize why. This dog has about 1 million polys. If you attempt to animate something that has 1 million polygons, your computer will promptly scream and die. So instead, I retop it. That means that I took the trillion polygon model and made it not that bad. This will not be accepted. If you turn in something that looks like this, I will have concern. Mostly because it means you're probably not using Maya, or if you are using Maya, you're doing something terribly wrong.
It's smooth.
This was originally made in ZBrush. ZBrush causes this to happen because it is a different modeling software than Maya. This is fine. If you turn in something that looks like this, I'll still be confused about your skill level, but I'll be happier than if you turn in this. Moving on. Well, that's the dog. And that's our heads-up display. I strongly encourage everyone to use the heads-up display so that they make sure that things aren't broken. If you have a simple shape like a cube, and it tells you that the cube has 14 edges and 7 sides, that means something's wrong. All right. Going down the line. Windows. Windows is a wonderful little place that lets you change how Maya looks. For instance, right now I have it in the general side. If I set it to modeling, oh, come back. Ooh, Maya has changed. This side panel has changed. This side panel has changed. This entire workspace has changed. If I go to the other modeling, the expert one, you don't need the bars anymore once you get to expert level. For our purposes, you will probably be using the default workspace. Right. If you would like to open a particular window, for instance, if you are an animation major, you might want to care about the graph editor. That's also in here. The graph editor is where we make things move. Great. Outside of the Windows menu, the one you're probably most likely to use is this happy little bar here. This is the modeling workspace. This is the rigging workspace, in case you're an animator. Did you notice anything change? Probably not. I'll do that again. Modeling, we have quite a few more buttons up here. If I change it back to rigging, it gets rid of all of the ones that care about modeling and adds in the ones that care about rigging. If I do the same thing for animation, we have animation stuff up here now. If we do rendering, we have rendering stuff up here now. Great, easy. But you will be living in the modeling workspace and the rendering workspace. So you probably won't be touching the rendering workspace for a bit. Moving down the line in the modeling workspace. Mesh. Mesh is great. Mesh is wonderful. We will be using Mesh a lot. Mesh is very good for doing things to mesh. So I have the cylinder. I have the cube. Whoa, whoa. Who here knows logic? And or XOR. We've got one. Great. This is logic, except that it lets you stick things together. So, for instance, if I hit union while I have my cube and cylinder selected, what do you think happens? They unite. That is an excellent observation. Boom. I now have poly surface 1 instead of cube and cylinder. They move together now. You'll also notice this highlighted red thing in the background. That's because, technically speaking, the cube and the cylinder are still there. If I select the cube and move the cube around, the cube moves with the cube. But if I go back to selecting these things, they still move together. Has that confused anyone?
Yes.
Great. Let's go again. I have a cube and a cylinder. I have united them. What has happened is that if you look at this habulous over here, we have P cylinder, P cube 1, P cube 2, and polysurface 1. The actual cube that I have unioned together with the cylinder was P cube 1. The cylinder is P cylinder 1. When I hit unite, union, they are still in the list right here, but they are also together down here. What does this mean? Well, it means that if I decide that I don't want this cube to be a cube anymore, let's say that I actually want it to just be a really weirdly shaped rectangle, I can select the red outline of the cube and squish it, and now I have a weirdly shaped rectangle as part of my cylinder. Chances are you won't be using this, but it's a cool thing that I've used recently and that I would like to pass on to you. Practically speaking, this is very confusing to some people because, as you mentioned, why is there ghosts? Ghosts bad. How do we get rid of the ghosts? Well, if we don't want to ever deal with the ghosts again, I can select my polysurface 1. I can go to modify, you might have remembered modify. I can go to freeze transformations. I'll describe what that does in a second, but let's not do it right now. I can go to delete by type history. What does delete by type history do? Delete by type history says this object, whatever I have selected, is brand spanking new. Nothing has ever happened to that object ever. So if I hit delete by type history, whoop, the ghosts are gone. P cube 1 and cylinder 1 are gone forever. And instead, all we have is this mishmashed cube and cylinder. You can still undo this if you really want to. No worries there. Whoa, good. Now let's assume we didn't want to union our objects together. Alright. Instead, keep on doing until they're back to 1. Great. I will now drag these together so that one is inside of the other. In fact, I'll drag it slightly up so that we can actually see what's going on. Other operations. Boolean. Difference. A minus B versus B minus A. That means it cares about the order you have it selected in. The first one you selected is A. The second one you selected is B. Good. If I subtract A from B, I will quickly say that the green one is the most recent one that is selected, so that is B. If I select A minus B, we will have a cylinder-shaped hole in our cube. Nope. Why don't we have a cylinder-shaped cube in our cylinder-shaped hole in our cube? We do. There it is. But we also still have the cube. Why? Because Maya is sometimes weird like that. But you will notice, or if you remember earlier, I mentioned that n-gons are bad. If you look at our cube now, everything on the inside of this hole, good, quads, triangles. That top face of the cube, not so much. Right. This singular face has quite a few edges. As you can see, it has 6 degrees. Bad. Oh, do we fix something like that? I'll get there in a sec. Let's undo our difference real quick. Oh, you cease to exist. Thank you. Let's do B minus A. Now we have a cube-shaped hole in our cylinder. Great, that was to be expected. And the other one that really matters is intersection. Haha. This is the region that was occupied by both objects. Great. The other thing we care about for mesh is combine. What does combine do? If I click combine, it looks like I've unioned them. They are one object now, but you'll notice that there's no ghosts. The reason that there's no ghosts is because there's no new mesh, actually. Instead, they're now sort of in this group with a transform and some history on them. And if I select all of the faces, we will get there in a second, I can actually still play around with them, and you'll notice that they're not actually stuck together. They're just separate and bundled together. Combine is union, but without a sense of permanence. If you want to break a combined group, there is also a separate function. Fill the hole, reduce, smooth, all of these mildly useful. Smooth is interesting. We'll talk about that towards the end of today, but not right now. Edit mesh. Let's talk about edit mesh. I'm going to delete the cylinder for a second. Edit mesh. Edit mesh has a bunch of tools. If I select one of these tools, if you look at this left sidebar, let's start with the left sidebar before I go into edit mesh. The select tool is Q. Has anybody played a QWER game? QWERTY. Great. These are your MMOs, your MOBAs, anything that says select things with QWER, those are those type of games. Select is Q. That is how you click on things. Move is W. That creates this little widget that lets you move things. If you've been wondering how I've been moving things, it's by hitting W, and then I can move these little arrows around. Same thing, I can also just click on these in the sidebar. Great. E is rotate. You'll see it there. Aha. E is rotate. This gives you this widget that lets you spin your object around. If you grab one of these three lines, you will just rotate along an axis. If you grab the blue circle around the widget, that's what we call these widgets, by the way, you will rotate relative to the camera. If you grab anywhere else, you get free rotation, and all bets are off. If you hold Shift or J. If you hold J, it snaps to, I believe, 10-degree angles. Any confusion about rotate? Good. Okay. The last one is scale. Ooh, what was that? Scale is R, and that gives you the same arrow widgets that we had with move, except that they're squares at the end now. And if we grab these, it squashes and stretches the object. If you have something more complicated than a cube, say a hospital bed, these can do really weird things. So do be careful about doing this on entire models. I'll show you how to do face select in just a bit. How do I move the camera around in my scene? I have my happy little mouse. It doesn't really matter what tool I'm on. If you hold the Alt key, then your mouse, when you click on it, becomes this world panning tool. If you Alt and middle click, we start panning. You'll notice that it now is a 4-pronged arrow. And if we right click, we go in and out. So again, left click, warble, middle click pan, right click zoom. The mouse wheel also works for zoom. There are different kinds of zoom. Don't worry about that for now. Good. Now, edit mesh. What is happening in the edit mesh tab? Edit mesh, bunch of things. Important ones are bevel at the top, Right second from the top, circularize. We'll get there. Anybody that's played around with Maya might know what circularize means. Anyone that knows English might know what circularize means. Any guesses?
Make it a square.
Makes a square. Yes.
Thank you.
If you use the circularize tool on any 4 points, it'll make a square.
I'm so smart.
Makes regular polygons is the correct answer. Connect and detach, you probably understand what those mean intrinsically. Extrude is very important. We will be talking about extrude in just a second. Merge is very important. We'll be talking about that a whole lot. Flip and symmetrize, probably won't be using. Maybe if you want to get really creative. And everything below that, probably not. Duplicate and extract, maybe. We'll see. In order to properly understand what these things do, let's talk about how we select things that aren't just the cube. If you hold right click while you have something selected, you will get this happy little menu pop up. And you can drag the mouse around as long as you hold right click, and the menu won't disappear. But as long as you hold right click, we'll have this pop up. In order clockwise, we have edge, object mode, UV. Oh dear, I've hovered over UV for too long. Multi, face, and vertex. All of you probably understand what those mean. Edges means I can now select only the edges of an object. Boop, I've selected an object. If I go to a move tool, now I can move an edge. If I go to the rotate tool, oh dear. This is a problem. I'll explain why in a bit. If I go to the scale tool, whoop, good. You can also select multiple things. How? By holding shift. If I hold shift and click things, I now have 3 edges selected. Whoop. Same thing with rotate. Oh god. You'll notice that rotating things doesn't give you things that are clamped to the rectangle, right? This doesn't make it look like a rectangle still. It just physically rotates the shape that you have selected, which means that if you rotate things too far, you start breaking things. If you ever see a black face, you'll notice that most of the faces on this object are gray. If you ever see a black face like this, that means that your geometry is bungled quite badly, and that you probably should try to fix that, usually by undoing the last thing you did. Please fix yourself. Thank you. That is a thing that I will be saying often. That is a thing that you will be saying often. You will scream at your computers while you're working on these projects. That's normal. Humans like to personify their troubles. The computers know. Maya knows. So that's edges. Vertexes gives you these purple dots. You probably can't see them. I'll try and zoom in for you, but you'll notice that the dot itself doesn't get bigger when you zoom in. However, you'll probably be able to see them on your own computers if you can't see it on mine. But same thing. I now have a dot. Boop. I now have 2 dots. Move them, rotate them, scale them, what have you. Hitting keyboard shortcuts while I'm not looking at the keyboard is confusing. Great. Faces, same thing. Bop, I have a face. Faces, very good. Work. Now, faces have a fun thing about them. In fact, so do edges. To show you what I mean, I'm going to do something weird that I haven't shown you before. Up on the right side of the bar. Actually, let me return this to basic cube shape. Oh dear. Also, object mode takes you back to selecting the whole object. Good. I want to make a new cube. Cube. Summon cube. If I look at the right sidebar here that I've sort of been ignoring for the past 10 minutes, you'll see that I have a bunch of options about cube shape 3. This is cube shape 3. How do you know? This is p cube 3. You also have p cube 3 over here. P cube 3 also has a bunch of text under it. These are a bit confusing. The important ones are the ones that say polycube 3, and then you have width, height, depth. Those you can probably understand what they might mean if you play around with these. Width, height, depth. Everyone who has ever drawn a graph, you know the XY planes. Maya has the same thing. If you look at the bottom left corner of the scene, you'll see that there's an X, a Y, and a Z arrow. That's because Y in Maya is up, and Z and X are on the ground. This is different from Unreal, but we'll get there when we get there in about a month's time. But just know that dimensions are a thing. Great. So this is the attribute editor. The attribute editor lets you fine-tune certain things. More importantly is the channel box just directly above it. This shortens the attribute editor down into a couple very simple things. Firstly, translate is where things are. I move that around, I move where the thing is. Great. If I drag one of the arrows, it changes where the translates are. Great. If I rotate the object, it'll tell me how much in what direction it is angling. And if I ever want to undo something that I've rotated a trillion times and I don't know how to get that back, I can tell it, go back to 0. Ta-da. Same thing with scale. Currently I have it at 1218. Let's say I want it really tall. Since Y is up in Maya, I can say, okay, I want it 20 blocks tall, precisely. There we go. I want it 15 wide, 16 thick. Boom. I now have a shape that is exactly that. So that it's, scale is weird because it's in both directions. So it's actually not 20 tall, it's actually 40 tall. We can double check that by rotating it and measuring it up against a grid. Oh, please function. Oh. Can't find source for state. Joy. Okay, so something is wrong with the Maya preferences on this computer. So I'll very quickly show you about the View tab. If you go to the View tab, you can select what camera you're looking at things from. Well, I've selected the camera. Great. Let me remember how to change the view. Is it below that? Oh, gosh darn. I haven't used Maya in a bit. Cycle through cameras. I'm in the side X view. You'll notice that this view, I cannot rotate around. It gives me this happy little X thing. But I can still pan it around. Again, same mouse keyboard shortcuts. Left click gives me this square select now. But middle click still lets me pan around. And I can still zoom in and out. But now I essentially have this side view. If I hit cycle again, now I'm in the top view. You can see it says top Y. Great. Now I'm looking at the top view of my objects. And this is where we can see just how tall this object is. If you really wanted to, you could count the squares, figure out that it's fully tall. You can cycle through the camera again. This is a different side view. This is the front view. Keep going. We're back to the perspective view. Anyone who's anyone might have also known if you hit spacebar, this happens. Oh dear, what happens here? If you hit the spacebar while you're hovering over the scene view, you get those 3 views that we just saw and the perspective view in form. If I then hover over any one of these, click into it, and hit the spacebar again, I snap to that view. All with the spacebar. Have I lost anyone about changing the camera view? Great. Either you guys are great at paying attention, or some of you are too nervous to ask questions. Either way, please ask me if you have any questions before, during, or after class. Moving on, where were we? Edit mesh. If I select an edge loop, now we're going to get into the fun stuff, and I go into edit mesh, and I hit bevel, it bevels the edge. Great. This is how you get rounded corners on things. Whenever you use something in the edit mesh tab, you'll get a happy little menu, and you'll be able to play around with these. So if I want it to be a thinner bevel, I can click and drag on the word fraction, and that'll let me play with it by panning it left and right. Or if I happen to know, oh, I want my bevel to be 0.2, I can just type that in the field. Same thing with all of these, they all do different things. Segments, if I add segments, it'll give me a more rounded corner. Whoop. But now notice that if I have a more rounded corner, this face is a nightmare. It has quite a few edges. It's a problem. We'll get around to fixing that. Undo my bevel. Great. What else do we have? Bridge. So, if I select a face, You will do this often. If you select a face and hit delete, you now have a hole in your object. This is fine sometimes, and if you ever want to fix one of these holes, you can select two opposite faces, go to Edit Mesh, hit Bridge. Ta-da, new face. You can then subdivide that face, but notice that if you do this, looks like this face now has quite a few more edges, except that's actually a lie. If I drag this down, you'll notice that there's still a hole there. That's because what Bridge is doing is not actually filling the hole, it's just creating a face that looks like it's filling that hole. If I had let the divisions be 0, it would be fine, but since I added subdivisions, this face that I subdivided has 4 new vertexes that aren't on the bottom face. Any confusion about that so far? Great. People should be confused at this, but moving on. How do we fix that? Well, if you want to subdivide a face that you're adding in, we go to Edit Mesh. Edit Mesh, Mesh Tools. One menu over. Mesh Tools, we have 2 things in Mesh Tools that we really care about. They are Multicut and Insert Edge Loop. Any guesses as to what Insert Edge Loop does?
It adds an edge loop.
Correct, it adds an edge loop. Oh joy. So if I have Insert Edge Loop selected, you'll notice that every time I select the tool, it becomes the extra tool on the sidebar. If I ever go to one of these and I hit G, it'll take me to my most recently used tool, so I'm back to Insert Edge Loop. If I go to Insert Edge Loop and I click on an edge, I now have a new edge loop. Huzzah. Give me another edge loop, please. Thank you. Another one. Thank you. Great. You'll notice that these edge loops are not evenly spaced apart. That's all right. If we hit undo a couple of times and double click this tool, we get tool settings. Huzzah. If we want 4 equally sized or distanced loops, we could hit insert with edge loop. No, use multiple edge loops. Use equal multiplier. How many edge loops do we want? Let's say 3. Great. And then if I click on an edge, please. There we go. Now I've inserted quite a few edge loops at once. Anyone confused so far? Great. Now, if I want to plug up this hole, if I double click an edge of a hole, I will select all of the edges around that hole. Notice how they all go from blue to orange. Single click, 1 orange. Double click, all orange. Good stuff. If I select a single edge, hold shift and double click an edge, I also get the whole loop. Good. If I now bridge this, something interesting will happen. I now have a singular face, but unlike last time, if I select one of these and drag it down, I won't get a hole. Why won't I get a hole? Because I told it to bridge all of them. However, this is all one face. This one face, if I hide our multiple edge loops button, has quite a few edges. This is bad. Undo. Instead of selecting all of those, select the 2 on the ends. That is with shift, select the 2 on the ends, don't select the ones in the middle. If I do that and I hit bridge, I failed miserably. All right, let's do it the other way around. Select these, click, and these. There we go. Now if I hit bridge, haha, my bridge already has the correct number of subdivisions in between. And if I drag one of these down, everything will be fine. Oh dear, don't do that. We haven't gotten around to showing them that yet. Good. But now all of my slides have 4 edges and everything is happy-dory. Good. That's bridge. And insert edge loops. Let's go back to boring old cube. Cube, please plug up the hole, I beg you. Thank you. Cube. Give it up for Cube. Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Other tool that matters in this window is multicut. What is multicut for? I now have a knife. You'll notice that my mouse has become a knife. Knife is very fun. If I click anywhere on the knife, I get an orange line. I am now an anime protagonist. If I drag that orange line over the mesh, ha 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 ha, I've inserted an edge loop that goes all the way around. Relative to the camera position, I've cut cleanly through it. These edges are interesting. Why? Because some of the sides have 3 edges, 1, 2, 3. Some of them have 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Others might have more, others might have less, depending on how you decide to cut. If you hold shift while you drag the happy little knife around, it'll snap to certain angles. So if you ever want a 45-degree cut, you can hold shift, say, I will hold it at a 45-degree angle, and cut cleanly. Okay? And that's a 45-degree cut. It still is relative to the position of your camera. So if you want to do this correctly, we can hit spacebar, go to our side view, hold shift, cut a 45-degree angle into this cube, hit spacebar again, go back to the cube. Ha 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 ha. That looks like an actual shape. Great. Undo that. So, any questions on the multi-cut tool so far? Great. Moving on to multi-cut tool use number 2. If I hold shift while I'm hovering over the object with the multi-cut tool, you'll notice that the closest edge to the knife turns red, and that I get a happy little black dot. If I click, I now have a blue dot, and if I click on another edge, I get another blue dot and a happy little orange line. At this point, I'm no longer holding anything, my hands are off the keyboard. If I keep holding shift and clicking on the mesh, I can draw whatever cut I want, hit enter, and I get just the edges that were orange. Great. If I hold shift, if I hold control and drag the mouse over towards the edges, I now get loops. And I can insert edge loops. You'll notice that there's a happy little percentage number at however percentage of the closest edge to the knife that you are holding it. So if I wanted a edge loop that is about 16% of the way close to this edge, boom, now I have a 60% perfect edge loop around that edge. Same thing any other way. If I hold both control and shift at the same time, instead of doing that, it will snap to 10%, 70%, 60, 50, etc., 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 so you can get precise cuts. So if I wanted, say, a 50% cut, another 50% cut, this 50% cut would be 25% of the way. So I can divide it into quarters without ever touching the multi-edge loop tool. Any questions so far? Yes.
Could you repeat that last bit? Or
Yes. So if you remember when I did the insert edge loop tool, the way I got 4 edges into this cube was I told it use multiple edge loops and told it to make 4. Great. Instead, I could take the multi-cut tool, hold control to get my edge loops, hold shift to get it to snap to places, and then just left click to add however many edge loops I want. Good, good, good. That's most of what you're going to care about in the mesh tools category. We might touch append to polygon once we get to some of the harder pieces of geometry. I'll very quickly show you what the append to polygon tool looks like. I'm going to quickly delete the space. I'm going to add in a couple of edge loops just so that things look weird. Boom, boom, boom. And this is what the append to polygon tool looks like. My edges have gone green. It gives you a little pop-up that says click a boundary edge. What is a boundary edge? A boundary edge is any edge that is on the edge of a black polygon, not the other edges, only the ones on holes. And if I select an edge on a hole, this happens. The rest of the edges on the hole have gone purple. And you get these happy little arrows telling you which way the edges are flowing. There's flow involved. Why is there flow involved? Well, you see, everything is right-handed. If I attempt to go against the flow, so you'll notice that the edges are pointing up and counterclockwise. If I instead go clockwise, they go back from being purple, and mine is unhappy. Instead, let me do my thing again, thank you. Quarter edge, please. Thank you. If I instead go with the flow, I can start painting faces. Bip, boop, bop, bip, boop, bop. And I can go however many deep I want, hit enter, and I have created a face. I have appended, which means to stick together, the edges that I have selected into a brand new face. However, you'll notice that if you do this wrong, as I have just done to show you for this purpose, this face has 5 sides. 1, 2, 3, 4, and the one cutting across the diagonal, 5. That is wrong. Don't do that. So, Alex, how do you fix things like this? That's an easy answer. Do you remember our friendly multi-cut tool? This is our multi-cut tool. This face has 5 sides. How do we fix that? Well, what if it had 6 sides? Huh? Yes, what if it had 6 sides? So let's start by cutting it in half. If we cut this face in half, then we already have this polygon having 5 faces, remember? But this polygon has 4 faces, and we can fix that. This edge now has 5 faces. We can continue using our multi-cut tool, cut these all the way around, and this adds an edge loop that fixes some geometry. Not all of it, but some of it. Oop. We still have this problem. How can we fix that problem? Well, there's 2 ways. If we draw a triangle, we now have a polygon that is composed of tries. Remember, these are 3. 1, 2, 3. That one has 4, so everything is perfectly fine. We've subdivided a 5-sided polygon into a 4 and 3 3-sided polygons. We can also just cut off one of these edges. Whoop up. Because this face now also only has 4 sides. This one's still a triangle, but this one has 4 sides, so that's fine. And if we select these faces, we can see that it makes a clean loop. And if we select these faces, we know that it just ends in disappointment. So everything's fine. If we wanted this loop to be perfect, you'll notice that this loop, again, I'll show this loop off. This vertex here dips down lower than the other ones. If I go to the move tool, go to vertex, and I select our unfortunately droopy vertex, we can actually move it so that it lines up with the other 3 that are a part of its loop. How, you might ask? Well, if you hold V for vertex, your move tool will snap to the vertex that is underneath your mouse. Why? Maya. If you hold C, it'll snap to curves. You'll notice that that does nothing right now. That's because there are no curves. If you hold X, it'll snap to the grid that we made earlier. Duck, 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 duck. You'll notice that it's a lot less smooth if I don't hold X, but if I do hold X, it goes duck, 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 duck. Great. Any questions about snapping the things? Yeah, great. Once again, the vertex, yes.
Oh, I was gonna ask, which is the one for curves?
C. C, V, and X down at the bottom, just above your spacebar. X is grid, C is curve, V is vertex. If we refer to our happy little Maya thing, it says it right here. X snaps to grid, C to curves, V to points. This image should go live by the end of class. I think I set it up to post to D2L at the start of class, but if I didn't, I apologize. Yes.
Is this on D2L?
It should be. If it's not, scream at me.
Okay.
I'll actually double check D2L right now. Horse home. Huh, interesting. 5:10. Wow, there's the issue. What time is it? 4:23.
Can we do more?
24. Yes, please.
Ah.
Great. It should go live within the next minute.
Awesome. Also,
Refresh D2L, see if it's there.
Can you reshow the file set project? I know that.
Yeah,
was
let me
very
go through that
beginning,
again. That is a good question. We'll do it again.
Because I didn't have my hard drive out, so I was like,
We've opened Maya. Oh dear. We'll make a new Maya project. I do not wish to save the bed in the cube. Great. New Maya project. We did something in this Maya project. Alright. Good stuff. Maya project. File. Set project down at the bottom. Where do you want to save it, Your Honor? I would like to save it to my documents folder. Where? I'm going to right click in this happy little box, make a new folder. Maya project. Ding. Set. Oh no. Would you like to create a default workspace? I would love to create a default workspace. Thank you very much, Maya. If I then go into the File Explorer, go to my documents where I made the folder, I now see that there's a Maya project folder, the one I just made, and I have a default workspace. This is empty. This does nothing for me. I then go back to Maya, hit project window. It's going to ask, would you like to make a current project, new Maya project, location, all of these folders? You will tell it yes. Right. Now if I go back to File Explorer, I have all of my folders. Hooray! Scene, script, sound, source images. These are all of the things we're going to need. If I then go File, Save, Scene, or Control S, you'll notice that it has Control S there. If I save it, it'll automatically open to my Scenes folder. I can name this cube_0. This is my first cube. I can go back to my File Explorer, look at my Scenes folder. Why are you not here? Should be here. New project Scenes, my cube. Aha! Because it's not like, where is new project? New project? Hello, am I blind? Documents, Maya, see, blah, blah, blah. Should be here. New project. No, it is. Alright, let's reset my project. Sometimes this happens. Set project. We already made the Maya project. We already made all the happy little folders. If I come back in here, Maya project, select it, set project. Great. File. Save scene. Q_0. Go back to my files. Reopen my files because I've closed my files. Documents. Maya project. Scenes. Aha! I'm not a fool. There it is. Q0. That's how you set a project. Now, from here, thank you for bringing me back to this. I was planning on getting to this in about half an hour, but we can do it now. Increment and save is your bread and butter. After you've saved your first file, let's say that we bungle something up. I'm gonna bungle something up. It's wide now. Oh dear, I didn't mean to make it that wide. Well, luckily, instead of hitting Control Save, I hit Control Increment and Save. That is Control Alt S. If I do that, it won't ask me to name the file. In fact, I can hit Control Alt and S as many times as I want. It'll keep telling me that there are no changes to save, so I'm not going to do that. But if I go look at my files, instead of having cube0 overwritten, I now have cube0_version1. That's the wide version. But I can now reopen cube0. It'll reopen mine, and I'll have my thin cube back. Use increment and save because if you ever bungle something up quite a bit to the point where it can't be solved, and let me assure you that will happen, you can recover what you lost. Generally speaking, I would suggest you save your project every 10-20 minutes. Nah, it depends. I save my projects every hour. If you go to, let me remember where it is, auto saves, Windows, settings and preferences. This is a place. Windows, setting preferences, preferences. This gives me my preferences window. This is where, if you can't see orange on blue on gray very easily, you can change colors of things. So right now my highlight color is lime green. That's why when I click on things, they're lime green. If I change my highlight color to not that, it won't be that. Down here, if we scroll through here, we have wonderful, happy little things. UI elements, view cube, etc., etc. Display. What I believe that in polygons we have units. Units are somewhere in here. Polygons vertex size, we can increase that so that our dots are visible. If I change this back to vertexes, make my dots huge. Didn't seem to make my vertexes huge. Interesting. Gotta love it. Gotta love Maya. It keeps everything you've ever wanted in places where you can never find them. Yeah. Settings, auto save. Where is auto save? It's in here somewhere. I know it's in here because I use it. Animation, assets, colors, camera management, files and projects. Aha, autosave. Preferences, files and projects, autosave, enabled. Why is it disabled by default? Because it slows down your computer. If you're using Maya at home on a laptop, chances are things are going to chug if you turn on autosave. On these computers, turn on autosave. Tell it to make an autosave every 10 minutes. 10 minutes from now, I'm going to open our autosaves folder, and we're going to have an autosave in there. Boop, save. Any questions about autosave? Great. Very quickly. Mesh display. Reverse is an interesting thing. If, for some reason, you have something like this, we have, oh, I selected two faces. Let's only select one. There we go. I have this shape now. This is essentially a box. If I rotate this upside down, it's like I have a tray on my desk. Right? That makes sense. Or a shelf covered thing. Yep. Oh dear. Please. Thank you. Great. If for some reason I wanted to turn this object inside out, you'll notice that the gray right now is on the outside, the black right now is on the inside. If I go to Mesh Display Reverse, well, now the black's on the outside and the gray's on the inside. Why does that matter? Well, if I wanted to, say, change this object's color, we'll talk about the hypershader later, but if I wanted to change this object's color, and I opened up this thing's texture, I can change the color to something like blood red, or pink. I can make it show me that color, please. Show me the color. Why don't you love me, Maya? Ay, ay, ay. I love Maya. This happens all the time. I hope that this gives you an inch of understanding for why Maya is both great and terrible. If I am struggling with Maya, imagine what you'll go through. You'll get to my point where you know that things are supposed to work, and then they don't, very quickly. But yes, if I have now changed the color of my box, I can decide which side's the inside, which side's the outside. If I go back to Mesh Display, reverse it again, boom, I swapped the color drive. Great. So, any questions about Maya so far? How Maya works, how Maya functions? Yes.
How did you make it to where you would drag it around with the click button again?
With my
Your mouse click button.
the space or the object?
Just instead of dragging it around in the cube in the top right corner, just with your mouse.
Alt left click. Alt left click is rotate. Alt middle click is pan. Alt right click is in and out. Other questions of navigating the Maya workspace? Yes.
Could you show how to autosave one time?
Autosave, yes. You go to Windows. You go to Settings Preferences. You go to Preferences. You go to File Projects. Enable autosave. It is disabled by default. And it'll ask, all right, you've enabled autosave. Do you want a prompt before save? If you click that, you'll get a happy little pop-up that says, hey, I'm about to save your project. Is that okay? And you'll say, I've been alt-tabbed on YouTube for 2 hours. I haven't done anything. No, don't autosave. Thank you. Or you'll tell it, yeah, I've been looking for 10 minutes and I forgot. It'll ask you if you want to limit your autosaves. If you tell it you want to limit your autosaves, that means that it'll only keep a certain number of autosaves. It won't stop autosaving when you get to 10. Instead, it'll delete the oldest one and make a new one. That make sense? Right. If you ask it, how often do you want to autosave? You can tell it how often you want to autosave. If you want to autosave it every hour, you can autosave it every hour. Instead it's set to 10 minutes right now. I believe it's only been about 5 minutes since I changed the settings. But right now, if I go back to my Maya project and I go to autosaves, this is where they'll exist when they exist. At some point, while I keep this open, Down here in this happy little box that says Mel, that's where you're gonna get all of your system messages. If anything ever goes wrong, or if something goes interestingly right, yeah, if you might need to stand above your monitor just to actually see where my mouse is at. But again, this is recorded, so I will be posting this eventually. Down there in that little mailbox, it'll say, we just auto-saved it for you. And you can say, oh, thanks. If it's something good, it'll be yellow. If it's something bad, it'll be red. Red means errors, means help, Alex, please. If it says yellow, then you're perfectly happy. Any other questions? Yes.
If we're using these computers, is there any reason we should limit the autosaves? And if we do, how many would you recommend using?
So, I believe I mentioned this on Monday. Let me go back to my file thing. If I go back to this PC, anything you save to the C disk will be wiped when you leave your computer, because somebody else will be logging into it and the C drive resets to factory. If you go into the D drive and save things there, you'll notice that you have files named by other people, Chloe, Clem, etc., PowerShell JSON, blah, 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 blah. Magic the Gathering. Ooh, okay, great. Glad to know that some of the professors use this computer for its intended purpose. If you save things to your D drive, chances are your files are fine. But be courteous, understand that there are hundreds of us. Everyone can have access to your computer. So if you fill up your D drive with 1,000 autosaves, people are going to get mad. So don't do that. If you're on your personal computer, or if you're saving things to an external drive, who cares? Use up all your space all you want. Any other questions? Good. I'm glad we've gotten this far. All right. Let's talk about the cube. Let's talk about the DICE project. Project number 1. Anybody that has read this far ahead, which is probably 0 of you because I don't believe you had access to the project, is about modeling dice. Make some dice. Yes.
Can they be Magic the Gathering dice?
They can be. So the project says, let's talk about that, because my response is, go for it. However, the probable response is, oh dear, I've been using Maya for 2 hours, and it keeps crashing, and I can't make a cube. So, the assignment says, make some 6-sided dice, make them nice, make them simple, make them happy. After you've made 2 boring 6-sided dice, also make a couple of cool ones. Seriously, like, go for it. I don't care how you make your dice, these are the ones I want you to make.
So you can put in more than one.
If you make these dice, I will be happy, you'll be good. If you make 12-sided dice, go for it. I like seeing people partake in challenge, because that's how you learn, right? If you think that these are boring and that you're 4 times better than everyone else, make crazy dice. Have fun with it, okay? This is an introduction class for a reason. Make mistakes. Yeah.
So you don't have to make the exact type of dice up here, but it's
Okay.
just a recommendation.
Let's rearrange some expectations. Make one of these. Make a die that is this, just one, and then make whatever else you want. The reason for that is to prove that you can get the basics down. If you can do this, you're good. If you can make something else, great, wonderful. I'm glad you had time. I'm glad you enjoyed making this. Does that make sense? Great. Now, chances are, some of you will run into roadblocks getting this far. In fact, chances are that that's going to happen to every single one of you. And that's perfectly fine. This is not a major project. This is project 1. Give it your best shot. Okay? I'm now going to go into how I would make something like this. I don't expect that anyone will be able to keep up with this. If I were to make this dice, I'd start with cube, because that makes sense. There's my cube. Don't ask why it's pink, it's because I changed the color earlier. I want to make a die. that means that at the very worst case scenario, one of these sides is going to have 6 pips on it. That means that I want it to have a certain number of subdivisions. So if I go into my channel box, remember I showed you how to move and rotate things here earlier. If I go into my channel box and I click on my cube, I also have this thing down here that says inputs. If I go into inputs, I can decide how wide I want the cube. I can decide how thin I want the cube. I can decide how tall I want the cube. I just want a cube, so I can keep all of that at 1. But I can also add in subdivisions without using the edge loops tool. So the 6th side of the die is going to have 3 by 2 pips. That means I need 6 subdivisions? Yes, 3 by 2. Except that I actually want 4 by 3. So this side is going to have 6 pips. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You'll already notice that there's something wrong. They're not spaced out the way they would be on a die. Then, what I would do, which I don't expect you guys to do, is I would go to the multi-cut tool. I would say, I'm going to make a rough blockout for where my tips are going to be. 1, 2, 3, 4. That is my first pip. I would go 1, 2, 3, 4. That is my second pip. And I would do that for each and every one of those. And then I would say, oh dear, I've added in extra geometry. This face has 6 or more sides. I'm going to add in some extra geometry to fix that. Boom, 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 boom. Then I would say, well, all right. What does this look like? It looks like not a circle. If I select all of these vertexes and I hit circularize, someone said it would make a square. That person is correct. If I can find where circularize is, boom, square. You'll notice that that square is a square, but doesn't line up with the edges. I would just rotate that around to get the fit. Great. From there, I would extrude these faces. Oh dear, what does that mean? I'm going to explain that very quickly. If I grab any amount of faces, I'm going to actually start with this side just to show you what I mean. I'm actually going to turn off my grid so that you can see what's about to happen. I have this face selected. If I go to Edit Mesh Extrude, I mentioned this one earlier, and I click that, it looks like I can just drag this face around. Except what's going to happen is I'm going to pull that face out. I have extruded it. Great. While I'm still here, I can actually even rotate it, scale it, do whatever I want to it, and it'll just be an extra pillar of cube flesh, is how I like to describe it. But practically, it's an extrusion. If you then select the opposite face and drag it out, you can see the difference that an extrusion makes. Does this make sense? If you extrude faces out, you get things that are completely separate. If you extrude things in, here, you'll get these black sides. Why will you get the black sides? Well, that's because the extra faces, if I pull this back out, this face, this side of my extrusion, is in the exact same space as these 2 faces. Right? They're back to back. And you can actually see that if I scale my extruded face in, that black stuff disappears. That's because the 2 faces that were there are now diagonal and not parallel to the other face. So if I did this with my tips, did that with my tips, I can select the 4 faces that I defined my tips to be, extrude them inwards, scale them down, and now I have started to carve what those might look like in a die. And I would do that 6 times over. I'd do it 2 more times, and then I'd worry about making them round. How many people did I lose during that explanation? Seriously? Okay, I saw a couple raise hands. Good. All of you should be lost.
I was about to say, should I know? Because I don't.
No. Well, so it's very nice that you aren't lost. If you're not lost and you were able to perfectly keep up with that, good. You probably have a thing for this stuff. Excellent. If you are lost, don't worry about it. I kind of went fast and loose with it. I'm going to go into what I properly expect you guys to do now. I believe we've got, what, 15 minutes left in class? Something like that? 4:44?
Nah, it's like 15 now.
Okay.
It ends at 5.
Okay. In that case, yes, in the back.
How do you select faces versus selecting edges?
Oh, do you select faces versus edges? Yes, good question. So, if you remember, you hold right click to pull up this happy little menu. Edges at the top, faces at the bottom.
Okay.
You hover the faces, and then you can start selecting faces.
Got you.
No problem. So, the first step of creating your dice is planning. If you were to start on paper, I'm going to attempt to open Photoshop. Chances are it's going to fail. But if you were to start on paper, you might believe that, as I did, you only need 6 subdivisions to get your pips in. That's true. That is the bare minimum number. But practically, what you will most certainly understand is that each pip has a level of thickness. And if you account for the level of thickness in each pip, you actually want double the amount of edge loops that you really want. What do I mean by this? So, this is the one face. Ooh, the one face. If you want to build your pips the way I did it, then you only need 2 subdivisions, right? And then, if you do that, oh, I'm doing the wrong one. 2, please, 2, thank you. 12, 2. If I did this, you could say my pip is going to be here. That's okay. But realistically, the pip has dimensions to it. So you don't want that. You probably want something like this. If I go to 3 and 3, then this is my pip. This whole square. I can just extrude that in. Go to the face. Select the square, extrude it in, and that's my first pip. Does that make sense? Then I can start thinking from there, well, okay, one of these spaces around the side is going to have my 2 pip. Let's say it's going to be this face. Because I added in the subdivisions earlier, this one already has subdivisions. So, what are we going to do about it? Well, let's undo a bit, because we didn't plan far enough ahead. This face is going to have 2 pips. They're going to be on the diagonals. What that means is that I'm going to need that same level of subdivision on both the top and bottom. So, let's start by evening things out. That's 3. Well, if I do that, then you might be thinking, well, these 2 faces would be my 2. But if you remember from my first extrude example, if I just pull these in, I'm going to get those icky black faces around the edges. So, before you extrude these faces in, instead, we're going to select one of them, and we're going to offset. What does this mean? Well, if you look at, if I hit Control E, by the way, that is the extrude shortcut, Control E, or if you go back into the Mesh Extrude menu, you get this happy little menu that says, you're extruding polyface 2. Great. What would you like to do about it? Well, if I grab this blue arrow like I've been doing, you'll notice that that is equal to the local translate Z. That's because the blue arrow means Z. Great. If I do thickness, let's set our thickness value to 12, it's the same thing, except you can sort of control it. And it doesn't quite mean the same thing, but practically, use thickness over local translate Z. That's my opinion. If you do offset, you get the happiest thing on earth. This is my favorite thing about extruding. I want to offset it by half. Anybody notice any difference? No. But if I zoom in, you'll see that my square now has this weird rim around the edge. I'm going to extrude it by 2 instead. And you'll see what I mean. That face of the square now has a ring around it with the diagonal edges. If you hold Shift while selecting these faces, you'll notice that that is a closed loop, separating the internal square from the rest of the mesh. Any confusion there? Great. What that means is I can select this face, hit my scale button, again that is R, and on the edges of the little gizmo you'll notice these 3 squares. These 3 squares mean do it in 2 directions at the same time. The big square in the middle means do it in all 3. So if I grab one of these, I'm only doing up and down. If I grab one of these, let's start with the cube. If I grab the cube, it means I'm doing it in all 3 directions. You'll notice that things get weird. If I do just the square, that means I'm doing just those 2 directions. So if I select the plane that is parallel to the cube, I can rescale it however I want. So if I do that with both of my 2 pick squares, again, Control P to extrude, offset it by 2, scale it in. Then I have these 2 squares that I can extrude in, and those will be my 2 pips. Any confusion there? Silence. Yes?
How did you get to the menu that has offset?
So I'm going to select the face. That is the face I want to extrude. There are 2 ways of going from there. If I hit Control E, I pop up that little menu. That is the extrude menu. That's way 1. The other way of doing it is by going to Edit Mesh, Extrude. That also pops it up because it's the same thing. Yay. A word of warning. I will now show you the vertex face menu. The vertex face is interesting. Let's undo this. So if you remember when we hold right click, we get edges, faces, and vertex. There's this one which is in between vertex and face that says vertex face. What does vertex face do? What vertex face does is it explodes our model. So what vertex face has done is it said, all right, we're going to cut your model up by the vertexes so that you can see each face individually. You can see the back side, you can see the front side. If we look at our extrusions, if I zoom into our extrusions, you'll see that there's these weird blue outlines around our extrusions. That's because there's an extra face in there. Why is there an extra face in there? Well, if I go back to face, select one of these and drag it, there was a secret face we didn't know about. Why is that there? That's because I purposely mucked it up. This happens if you accidentally extrude things twice. If you extrude things twice without reselecting your things, you'll get 0-dimensional faces. So if we look here, this edge loop thing that looks like it should just be an edge actually has 4 sides. Because it's non-dimensional, Maya will scream at you. Unreal will scream at you. Everything will say you have non-manifold geometry. So avoid this as much as possible. If, for some reason, you're trying to select a group of faces, so for instance, if I go back to face, if I have this loop around the middle, and I select one of the faces, and I hold Shift and select one of the adjacent faces, I select an entire loop. If you have the ghost faces and you try to do this, it breaks. Again, if you select the face, select an adjacent face with Shift, and you double click it, you will get a closed loop around the object. That means your geometry is good. If you do that with a broken face, no dice. However, now that I pulled this one out and we can see those ghost faces, you'll notice that it works perfectly fine. Why does this one break? Because that 0-dimensional face is in between. If I wanted to do this same effect, I would have to click the 0-dimensional face, but I can't do that. So the only way to fix that, well, the primary way to fix that, is to grab your ring of faces, boop, 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 use my ring of faces, pull them out, see that extra ring of faces. We don't like this ring. I can hold Shift, select all of those faces, and delete them. Oh dear, what has happened? Well, you see, by deleting those faces, we haven't told the mesh, move the other faces back where we need them to be. Instead, we've just gotten rid of the faces we didn't like. What we do then is we grab our ring of faces again. If you remember that if we can hold V, we can clamp our movement to our vertexes. We can hold V and bring it in, snap it to where it's supposed to be. And now comes the creme de la creme, the merge tool. If I select these four faces, I'm going to swap to vertex, and I'm going to click and drag. Oh, where'd my heads up display go? Heads up display, polycount, where are you? Thing, polycount. So, this is the corner of our cube. Everyone agree? Good. I'm going to select the corner of our cube. Oh no, there's two vertexes there. Why are there two vertexes? Well, if I go back to face and drag these faces back out, it's because we have the real corner of our cube and the corner of these faces. That makes sense. So if I select my two vertexes again, we know that they're supposed to be a singular vertex. If we go to Edit Mesh Merge, anybody know what merge does?
Merges.
Correct! Ding! Now we have one vertex. Hooray! If I now grab the faces, things will be pulled together. That singular vertex is now merged. The other three are not. Great. So, how do we fix this more? I will now show you the miracle of numbers. On your keyboard you have numbers, 1 to 10, well 1 to 0. If you hit 1, you'll get this. This is weird. If you hit 2, you get this. 1 returns it back to normal. 2, this. 1, back to normal. Great. 3 smooths it. But if you remember 2, we had the original shape sort of in a grid around the weird blob. 3 removes the cage. 2 creates a cage, 1 gives you the original object, 3 gives you this view, which we call the smooth view. Any question as to why it's smooth? Yes.
Is this what you did with the dog?
Yes. Kind of. No. I did the opposite of this to the dog. I made it from smooth into a not smooth version. 3 gives us a smooth preview of whatever it is we have on screen. So, for instance, if I go back to the 1 view and I select one of these edges, let's select this edge here. When I hit 3, we can, 3. Why don't you love me? Thank you. 3, we can see that that edge, which was straight, is now curved. It's not actually curved, but again, this is a preview. We haven't changed the geometry, we've just made it pretend that it's changed. So if we hit this 3 smooth preview, we can see that this corner, oh God, it's not smooth. That's because it's not blended properly together. Wow, okay, let's re-evaluate. If we hit 4, we get a wireframe. This is what's known as a wireframe. Any idea why it's called a wireframe? The frame is made of wires. If we hit 5, we get color back. If we hit 6, nothing happens right now because we don't have lights and textures on it. But we'll get there. So again, 3, smooth. 2, cage. 1, back to normal. 4, wireframe. 4 and 3 at the same time, smooth wireframe. 5, color. 1, back to normal. Great, so let's talk about 4. If we have it on 4, and we put it on vertex, well, you can barely make out the vertexes, they're purple. But now that we can see through the mesh, we can make sure that we're not selecting anything behind what we want to select. If we had it on 5, and I rotated it slightly this way, and I attempted to, no, stop, thank you. If I had it on 5, and I attempted to just select these 2 vertexes, the ones that we want to fix, we notice that we're actually selecting, if I pan slightly up, 8 vertexes. Well, that can't be right. That's because if I turn my wireframe on, I'll realize that I've selected 4 other vertices that I didn't want to select. If I want to deselect vertices, I can hold Control. You'll notice that my mouse, when I hold Control, spawns a little minus sign on it. If I hold Shift, well, if you hold Control, you get a happy little minus sign. And I can drag a square by holding left click and deselect everything with the minus sign. If I hold Shift, I add things to the selection. Again, no selection, drag a square, select everything in the square, hold Control, deselect everything in the square, hold Shift, add things to the selection. Anyone confused about that? Great. So, the vertexes that we want to merge, if we return to our smooth view, are this one, and that one. Right? We can double check that by dragging our faces out and seeing, yep, there sure is a hole here. Great. Go back to vertexes, go back to wireframe, select the broken vertexes. Now, if I select all of the broken vertexes, we can see that there are 6 vertexes we want to fix. That's correct. We can make sure that's right because there are actually only 3 vertices that we want to fix, and 6 is 3 times 2. If we hit Mesh Merge, we've solved the issue. There's now 3 vertexes. Good. But if you increase the distance threshold, we've now merged all of the selected vertexes. Be very, very careful with your distance threshold when you're merging things. Oh dear. Good. So again, mesh, merge. Be happy. Thing. Good. Now if we go back to color and we hit our smooth preview, we have something that looks almost like a dice. Any questions so far? So, what you will need to do for assignment number 1 is do that. Oh, so many times. Yes.
How are we supposed to remember this?
Well, you see, it's recorded. So I will be posting the video to D2L in case you can't remember it. But if you do this once, you will remember it. It will become muscle memory. That's how I know how to do this. It sounds crazy. Believe me, it does. But you do this for enough times and it becomes a part of you. So, yes.
Will we also be able to make a dice with A minus B?
A minus B?
Yeah, like having
Yeah, so, that's an excellent question. Whoop. I'm gonna rotate this around.
I'm just wondering if that's acceptable.
It's acceptable. No, yes. Every way you can come up with to solve the problem, perfectly doable.
Okay.
If you want to spawn in a sphere, oh dear. I'll give you this warning now. I encourage you to try and fix this. If I spawn in a sphere, and I select A, and then select B, square minus sphere, and I go mesh Boolean's difference, I now have a hole in my cube. That's great, but if I'm going to delete history on this just so that we don't see the ghosts. Delete by type history. If I have this looks like a die, but when you go into the smooth preview,
Oh God.
so why does that happen? Well, the answer is, remember those n-gons? This face has oh so many sides to it. It has one side for every side that the circle cut into it. That's why you get these weird diagonals that don't add up. So when I hit smooth preview, it attempts to turn all of those into curves. And if I go to my wireframe, you can see that the edge of the circle is shaped like a jagged saw. So yes, you can Boolean things in, but be warned, for doom follows you. If you wanted to do that in a sane way, if I make another sphere, sphere, and I drag that over to this side now, I'm going to make it larger. Great. Whoop, whoop. I need to make sure that it fits into that square. What I'm going to do to this sphere, first off, is I'm going to rotate it so that the origin, oh dear, I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees so that it points away from the face I'm going to bully it into. That way, it's radially oriented instead of edge oriented. Then I'm going to go into the polysphere settings, and I'm going to say 20 subdivisions. That's crazy. I want 6. 6 is safe. 8's better because we're working with squares. So let's actually do 8. 8's going to be better. Okay. And then if I boolean my 8-sided sphere into this, mesh boolean difference. Thank you. File. Edit. Sorry. Delete by type history. Then what I can do is I can delete these edges that I don't like. But before I delete them, I'm actually going to go to our multi-cut tool, and I'm going to add in a loop. I'm going to add in a loop both ways, and I'm going to connect the cuts that the sphere made to those new edge loops. Undo that. There we go. This is going to be the last thing we cover today. There we go. And this last one doesn't want to behave. Come on. There we go. And now that I've added those edge loops in, I can delete these ones that we don't like. And you'll notice that this shape looks slightly better, but it still has far too many sides. I can cut the diagonals. The diagonals are allowed. If you remember back to our original extrusions, we had those diagonals as long as they make trapezoids. Those are 4-sided shapes. If we look at these shapes very carefully, 1, 2, 3, 4 sides. So this is perfectly nice. We can double check that they are perfectly nice by seeing if they make a closed ring. So if I select faces, click one, shift double click one, we've made a perfect ring. And if I smooth preview this, ha 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 ha. So yes, you can boolean things, just make sure that you do it this way, ha ha, instead of this way. Any questions? Yes?
Isn't the final form of the models, they should all be smooth?
So, going back to the deliverable, your dice should look like this. That means that what I'm going to ask you for is 2 pictures. One is going to be a smooth preview version. It's going to look like this. And one is going to be the raw version, which is going to look like this. Go back to not being smooth, please. Thank you. It's going to look like that. I want both. But I also want you to show me the wireframes. I want to know how you did it. So you're going to have it selected so that I can see the wireframes. And what you're going to do is you're going to probably end up having like 2 or 3 of these lying around. I'm going to show you how to clone them going forward in a bit. You're going to angle them so that they look cool and I can see them from all sorts of angles. And then you're going to take a screen grab. Boop, boop, boop. Come on. Alright. Ta-da. A picture of dice. You're not going to have it selected on rotate mode so that I don't see that widget. You're going to have it on just select mode. And then you're going to post that image, and I'm going to be happy. And then you're going to post the same image, but with them smooth. Good. Anything else? Good. We don't have class on Monday. Hooray. That gives you extra time to work on these. Wednesday, we're going to go a bit more in depth on this, how I want you to present your work, you know, what it's going to look like, and I'm going to solve any questions you might have. On Friday, I will not be taking attendance. It is a lab day. I encourage all of you to show up so that if you have questions about anything that happened today, you can ask me. And I can sit behind you at your computer and say, oh dear, mine is on fire again. This isn't your fault. Welcome to Digital Need. All good? All good. What happened to that? Is the attendance still in the back? Attendance sheet's probably still in the back. All right, I'll grab that on my way out. Thank you for coming. You are free to go. Also, shout outs to everyone that went to the pizza place. The pizza thing.
Yeah, that was fun.
I have work. Yeah, it was good. It didn't rain right after work. Yeah, I
Gets his car.